right here. Right here.
What does it say?
U-869.
All right!
In 1991, a group of salvage divers came across a wreck lying at the bottom of the sea. At the time, they had no idea they were about to stumble onto something that would rewrite history.
They went to the United States Navy and they said, hey, we found a U-boat 65 miles off New Jersey. And the Navy said, we didn't sink it. And went to the Germans, and the Germans said, we didn't lose it. So they have this U-boat. They know it's a U-boat.
Hidden deep inside its rusted metal shell, this submarine held a secret the world had tried hard to forget. A secret that could completely shift what we thought we knew about World War II, and one that the government quickly locked away from public view. But when it cost so many lives to uncover, was it really worth it? This is the story of U-869, a forgotten piece of Hitler's war machine that went unexplained for decades. There's this Nazi mystery. No one's completely sure what really happened down there. The dream back then was to build a bomb that could flatten cities like London in one blow. The start of U-869 began on August 25, 1941, when it was ordered to be built under the command of Kapitän-Leutnant Helmut Neuerberg. Back then, Neuerberg had no way of knowing that this very submarine would be his final resting place just a few years later. After 3 long years of work, the U-869 was finally ready for action. It was a 251-foot-long monster packed with 6 torpedo tubes and a 37mm rapid-fire gun on its rear platform. It wasn't something any enemy ship wanted to come across. The U-869 was built for stealth and destruction at sea, but before any real missions could begin, the crew had to spend nearly a year in war training. Most of the men on board were young and inexperienced, with only a few seasoned sailors among them. That's something important to remember. The first mission. By 1944, the U-869 received its first real assignment. Orders came through. It was to patrol across the Atlantic. But the mission didn't go the way anyone expected. Not once did the submarine run into an enemy ship the entire trip. For the sailors, that must have been a relief. But they had no clue what was still ahead. Because when German command later ordered the U-869 to head to the Strait of Gibraltar, that order was never carried out. Instead, the U-869, a fully equipped submarine with a trained crew, simply vanished. No radio updates, no contact, just silence. Where did it go? Even the experts were left guessing. The cover-up. Eventually, the U.S. government stepped in with their own version of events. They claimed the American destroyer USS Fowler and the French subchaser L'Indiscret had spotted a submerged enemy vessel near Rabat, French Morocco. Depth charges were dropped, and they reported the enemy sub was destroyed. The U.S. said that sub had to be U-869. No proof, just a hunch. And that hunch became official history. But there were some big issues with this version. First off, no one had actually seen the sub before sinking it. It was assumed to be U-869 simply because it was thought to be nearby. Total guesswork, and no German records backed that up either. After the command to move toward Gibraltar, U-869 never sent another message. Standard procedure was to send regular reports, but they never did. The sub went dark and never came back up. Still, the story was tweaked to make it fit. It was a story that gave the U.S. Navy another victory and handed a final defeat to the already fallen Nazi Germany. But it wasn't real. The false story stuck, mainly because no one had any solid proof to challenge it. The pain. For the families of the 56 missing crewmen aboard U-869, the silence was the worst part. They had no answers about what had happened to their loved ones. No wreckage, no remains, nothing to hold on to. Just a plaque and a memorial. They had no idea that it would take decades for the truth about U-869 to finally surface. And even now, what came to light still leaves experts scratching their heads. The unlikely meeting. The first sign of something big wasn't found near Gibraltar, as the old story claimed. It happened far away, on the opposite side of the North Atlantic. The year was 1991. Bill Nagel, a well-known shipwreck diver, was sitting in a quiet inn, chatting with a charter fishing boat captain. Then the captain made a surprising offer. He wanted to give Nagel some information about a wreck he'd come across, one that no one had explored yet. The wreck was in a notoriously dangerous part of the ocean, just off the coast of New Jersey. And when I say dangerous, I mean it. The site was in a deep trench along the edge of the continental shelf. It was a death trap for anyone but the most skilled divers. The wreck sat 235 feet down, with strong currents and pitch-black water where one wrong move could mean disaster. The captain hadn't seen it with his own eyes. He'd only found out about it when one of his nets got caught on something massive. So no one really knew what was down there. It could have been anything, or nothing. Still, for reasons even he couldn't explain, Nagel was drawn to it. That single choice became the spark that would lead to one of World War II's most stunning mysteries being uncovered. Nagel didn't go alone. He brought a tight, skilled team with him. Two of the divers were John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, both legends in the wreck diving world, known for tackling the kinds of sites most people wouldn't dare touch. "There's a lot of artifact value down there," one diver would later say. "Not gold or silver, but things like the bell, plaques, keepsakes. Really? But to the right people, they're worth a lot." The first dive. Once the team was ready, the search got underway. It was going to be long, risky, and for some, fatal. At that depth, you don't get second chances. The water was dark and murky, and visibility was only a few feet. The currents made everything harder, and the divers' air supply limited how long they could stay below. But even with all that stacked against them, Nagel and his team didn't give up. Eventually, they came face to face with a submarine, resting untouched on the ocean floor since the day it went down. But one huge question remained. What submarine was it? They soon found clues, dishes marked with an eagle and swastika, clear signs it was a German U-boat from World War II, but there were no names, no serial numbers, just hints. Some of those divers would later give their lives trying to find the truth. The Curse of U. It was obvious the sub was old, definitely from the war years, but they still had no idea which one it was, or even what country it had belonged to. So, while they worked to solve the mystery, Nagel and the others gave it a nickname. U. It was just something to call it. Then, before they could get far, tragedy struck. After the discovery of U, Nagel and his team kept going back, diving deeper into the wreck to explore its interior. They were determined to learn more about this mysterious submarine. But diving under such dangerous conditions meant it was only a matter of time before something went wrong. And it wouldn't be just scrapes or close calls. Over the next 4 years, as the team pushed themselves against deadly currents to reach the U, 3 divers lost their lives. "You've got archaeologists out here trying to figure this thing out," one team member said. "We're not looking for treasure or anything like that. There's no loot here. We're just trying to ID the wreck." The first tragedy struck in 1991 when Steve Feldman died from a buildup of CO2 during a dive. It took 5 months before they recovered his body. The next year, another blow. Chris Rouse and his son, Chrissy, both died from decompression sickness. Chrissy had gotten trapped inside the sub when falling debris pinned him. His father stayed with him, trying to help, but both ended up using too much of their air supply. When they finally made their way back up, they were disoriented from the lack of oxygen. They ignored the stop-and-go decompression protocol and shot straight to the surface. Both died shortly after surfacing. The wreck was becoming deadly fast. Whispers started among divers. People said the U was cursed. And then, almost as if to prove the rumors right, Bill Nagel died in 1993. His cause wasn't the wreck itself, but his long struggle with alcoholism. Still, each year, someone connected to the dive seemed to meet a tragic end, directly or otherwise. An unending search. That left John Chatterton and Richie Kohler in charge of the U-dive missions. But it was getting harder to convince others to join them. Most divers didn't want to risk it. The curse had made people too nervous. Even so, Chatterton and Kohler kept going. For them, this wasn't about fame or thrill anymore. It had become about the men still lying inside the wreck, the ones no one had remembered. They felt responsible for giving those lost sailors a name and a story. 3 taps, 3 tugs, or 3 punches means trouble. That was one of the rules they followed down there. They also agreed never to film or disturb the remains of the crew they found inside the submarine. Out of respect, they left the bones untouched. But identifying the wreck was no easy task. Progress was painfully slow. The first clue came from the labels on the submarine's controls and valves. They were written in German, which strongly suggested it was a German U-boat. Based on its location, there were 2 possibilities: the U-550, which had gone down near New York, or U-521, lost closer to North Carolina. But the wreck was too far off course for either of those. So the trail went cold again. A new hope. Then, in 1997, the divers came across something different. A small, ordinary butter knife. But this one had something special. A name scratched into the metal by hand, not a company logo. The name was Horenberg. They checked the records, and sure enough, Horenberg had been one of the crew members aboard U-869. But wait, wasn't U-869 supposed to have sunk near Morocco? According to military records, the submarine couldn't have possibly been where the wreck was found during the war. 100 tons of cordite going off is enormous, one expert said. It'll rip a ship clean in half. It tore Invincible in 2. Still unaware that the report they were relying on was shaky at best, the divers moved on from that theory, too. The breakthrough. Then, in early autumn of 1997, the divers made their biggest discovery yet. During one of their dives into the submarine's motor room, they came across a box of spare parts. And there, clearly marked on the box, was a serial number. Had they finally solved the mystery of the U? The number was traced back to original shipyard records, and it matched the U-869 exactly. After decades of confusion, the civilian divers had done what governments and historians hadn't. They uncovered the truth. The false story that had followed U-869 and its crew for so long was finally corrected. All of it through effort, sacrifice, and loss. The identities of those lost sailors were finally honored, but for Kohler it wasn't over yet. "We're 20 miles off the Dutch coast," he said. "There's England over there and the Netherlands that way. I was trying to find the 3 cruisers and figure out what really happened to them." He made a trip to Germany and personally returned the engraved butter knife, the one that read Horenberg, to the sailor's granddaughter. He also found other relatives of U-869 crew members, showing them what really happened and where their loved ones were laid to rest. The damage. When the divers found the wreck, they saw clear evidence of serious damage. And not all of it was from time or corrosion. The left side of the control room had been nearly destroyed. That was one of the main reasons it took so long to identify the wreck. Many of the key documents that could have confirmed the sub's identity had been blown apart in that blast. They also found damage to the hull near the officers' quarters on the same port side. Experts believe the U-869 was struck by 2 blasts. And whatever happened, it happened fast. The crew's bodies were nowhere near the escape hatches. Their deaths had been sudden, unexpected, and brutal. They died where they stood, with barely a second to react. So, what could have caused damage that fast? There's no solid answer, no definite proof. What we do have are a few theories that might explain how U-869 went down. An unfortunate turn. The first theory connects to a known issue with World War II torpedoes. 2 ready to fire, 2 on the way. Sometimes these torpedoes would malfunction. Due to faulty gyroscopes or poor calibration, they'd spin back around and lock onto the very sub that launched them. When that happened, the result was as bad as you'd expect. The sub was destroyed by its own weapon. This dangerous glitch was known as a circular run, and some experts believe that's what took out U-869. But that raises another question. Why fire a torpedo at all? There are 2 possible reasons. Either the U-869 thought it had spotted a ship and launched an attack, or it was a test shot. Whatever the case, the torpedo may have doubled back and struck the sub. It's a believable theory at first glance. But there are issues. First, no ship in the area reported seeing or hearing any kind of explosion. And second, while circular runs did happen, German crews were trained to expect them. Yes, the U-869 crew was mostly inexperienced, but they still would have known the standard move: change depth immediately to avoid a hit. Would they really have fallen to such a rare known issue? Hunted and killed. That's why experts came up with a second theory. This version credits 2 U.S. destroyer escorts, the USS Howard D. Crow and USS Coiner, with sinking the U-869. Reports say the ships made contact with what they believed was a German sub off the New Jersey coast. Just 14 minutes later, one of them launched a round of Hedgehogs, a cluster of small anti-submarine bombs. Each of these tiny bombs was lethal if it struck a sub's hull. "We got the call," one sailor said, left the convoy and headed over. Dropped depth charges, too. Both ships attacked. After each blast, oil and bubbles rose to the surface, classic signs of a hit. They stayed and fired more rounds before rejoining the convoy they were protecting. Some experts now say this was what caused U-869 to sink, that the explosions hit the hull and tore through the subsystems. But again, there are problems with this theory too. The biggest one? The wreck of U-869 was found 46 miles from where the destroyers reported that encounter. That distance is way too far. No badly damaged sub could survive long enough to travel that far. And judging by where the crew's bodies were found, they didn't even have time to react, let alone steer the sub miles away before it sank. Still, the U.S. government has never questioned this version. They've chosen not to acknowledge the contradictions. According to the U.S. Navy, this is still the official version of what happened to U-869. And honestly, it's not hard to understand why. That version keeps the Navy from losing credit for a wartime kill during the World War II. An unlikely survivor. Earlier, we mentioned that U-869 had 56 men on board. But when divers explored the wreck, they only found 55 bodies. That's because one crew member, Herbert Goshowski, survived. Herbert was a radio operator assigned to U-869. But right before its final mission, he came down with pneumonia and purpura. Because of that, he was left ashore while the rest of the crew sailed out. That twist of fate saved his life. Later on, Goshowski turned out to be a vital part of confirming the sub's identity. When he saw the name Horenberg carved into the butter knife found inside the wreck, he immediately recognized it as the last name of his fellow radio operator, Martin Horenberg. That testimony was the final piece of proof. The wreck truly was U-869. For a while after that confirmation, it felt like the mystery was solved. But then something new was found: the sealed chamber. According to online sources, divers found a part of the submarine that had been sealed off for decades. It had been impossible to explore before due to old equipment. But in 2024, technology finally caught up. And what the divers found inside was completely unexpected. Inside the chamber, it was like time had frozen. Uniforms, food tins, logbooks, all still in place. But one item immediately stood out. It was a ceremonial dagger engraved with the motto of one of Germany's elite wartime units. Next to it sat a sealed crate containing a full dress uniform, complete with swastika armband and the Iron Eagle badge. They also found a box of Nazi memorabilia, along with a Nazi flag folded with exact military precision. There were also code books and several propaganda posters tucked next to the flag. None of this ever made it to the public. For obvious reasons, the discovery of these items was quietly kept under wraps. But it raises a huge question about U-869's true mission. Was it really just out on patrol? Or was something else going on? Looking at what was found in that sealed compartment, it's possible, maybe even likely, that U-869 was on a secret assignment to land covert agents on U.S. soil. That could explain why the submarine stayed completely silent. A significant find. Now, this theory still hasn't been officially confirmed, but if it turns out to be true, then Germany's spy network and propaganda efforts during the war were a lot bigger than we ever imagined. And that's not all. The wreck's location raises more serious questions. It proves that German U-boats were operating much closer to American shores than most people realize. Their goal? To sink any ship carrying supplies across the Atlantic to Europe. In fact, the problem got so bad near North Carolina that the area earned a grim nickname, Torpedo Alley. U-869's wreck is solid proof that even in the final years of the war, German U-boats were still active and dangerous in U.S. waters. But U-869 also reminds us of something else. History is often shaped by those who win. If that one fisherman hadn't crossed paths with Bill Nagel at just the right moment, the true story of U-869 might have stayed buried forever. Without the dedication and, yes, the loss of those brave divers, the wreck off the coast of New Jersey would still be just an unnamed mystery. And who knows how many other ships and subs just like U-869 are still lying out there, misreported or forgotten. Their true stories lost, rewritten to fit someone else's version of events? That wraps it up for today. What do you think really happened to U-869? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We've got more untold history coming your way.